Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my review of the most important new Seiko release in years. And that is saying something considering Seiko have not exactly been short of new releases of late, have they? I think there have been some standout new original designs over the last few years, including the Sharp Edge series, both the three-handers and the GMTs. And I am personally a big fan of the SRPE range, the so-called Dress KX. But let's be honest, these days Seiko seem obsessed with homaging themselves. I mean, the 5KX was just an updated version of the SKX. The SRP was a homage to the SNK. The SRPG was a new version of the SNZG, and there have been so many Arnie reissues and versions of the 6110 and the 62 Mass that I have genuinely lost count of them all. And I admit, today's watch offers nothing new visually. It's just a four-handed version of the 5KX, which, as discussed, is just an updated SKX. In fact, the four-hander even shares the SKX's jubilee. But I still think this new Seiko 5 Sport GMT is important for two reasons. The first is that it lowers the pricing bar for a big brand automatic GMT. In fact, I think it just about halves the price that you'll now pay for this style of watch. Once the hype dies down, I can see these settling into the mid $300 US price point. That is about half what you'd currently pay for a watch equipped with an ETA 2893-2, which in the current market is the entry-level automatic forehand movement. And that's got to be good, right? Big brand GMTs for the masses. But the release of this watch, I believe, is going to have a knock-on effect far greater than just this one model. An effect that is going to ripple through the budget watch market for years to come. And that is because of the movement in the back of it. This watch contains a 4R34. If that sounds familiar, it probably should do, as it's very closely related to the 4R35 and 4R36 found in dozens of Seiko's more affordable models. Those movements are also found in literally thousands of micro brands labelled as NH35s and NH36. Micro brands everywhere are therefore going to be licking their lips at the prospect of dropping these new NH34s into literally everything they produce. Take an old design, add a 24-hour chapter ring or bezel insert, stick in an NH34, hey presto, you have a brand new GMT model in your lineup. And we all know that Chinese brands can produce dive watches with sapphire and ceramic for well under $100. I give it no more than 12 months till we see Seiko powered GMTs everywhere with those specs for around $100, and that, my friends, is an awesome prospect. But that is for tomorrow. The Seiko 5KX GMT is very much the object of our attention today. Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. Alright, while I'm getting to the box, an apology and a thank you. I'm sorry if I sound a bit nasal today. I've been feeling under the weather this week. I took the test and it came back positive for man flu, and we all know there is nothing worse than man flu. I'm certainly better than I was midweek though, so we carry on. The thank you goes to Vincent at Wamada Jewelers. He hooked me up with one of these. These are like hen's teeth in Sydney at the moment. They are nowhere to be found. I had wanted an orange, but I couldn't get an orange. He hooked me up with a black one instead. I'll leave a link to his website in the description of the video. Tell him I sent you. I'm sure he'll look after you just as he looked after me. So if you actually made it through the intro, you know what you're getting here today. You probably knew what you were getting with this one anyway. Essentially, it is a four-handed 5KX on a new Jubilee bracelet. I looked at the 5KX when it came out 2 years ago and I was nonplussed. We got the 4R hacking and hand winding movement that the SKX lacked, but it was a 5 and not a Prospex. It only had 100 meters of water resistance, and I just didn't see the point of it. Certainly if you had an SKX in your collection already, a couple of pretty colors, but not that much else. This one, I believe, does have something else in the form of the GMT complication and that new Jubilee bracelet that potentially makes justifying a purchase all the easier, even if you have still got an SKX or two lurking in your collection somewhere. Size is very familiar, 42 millimeters in diameter, 14 millimeters thick, but only 45.5 mil lug to lug. That was the joy of the SKX. 007 and 009s, they fitted smaller than average wrist, no problem at all because of that compact lug-to-lug dimension. 22mm lug width, tapering down to just under 18, back up to just under 20 at the clasp. Sized up for me, 7-inch wrist, taking 4 links out. This one weighs in at 151 grams. The case looks and feels very familiar. Lovely smooth, high polish finish from Seiko, some brushing on the upper surfaces and crown guards at the 4 o'clock there. Now it is only a push-pull crown because it's a 5 and not a Prospex as discussed, only 100 meters of water resistance, and you get flat Hardlex crystal. Again, we know to expect Hardlex, Seiko's own mineral crystal, for the price they are charging for this one. Bezel. Bidirectional friction bezel, because it's a GMT, bidirectional is preferable. Friction, I'm not sure if that is preferable. Perhaps that will be in the moans and niggle section later on, but at least you do get to hit the hours and the half hours to track those awkward Adelaidean style time zones. And it is a Hardlex bezel insert. Now, I wasn't expecting this from the press shots. Certain angles, it looks all black. Other angles, it's a lovely silver grey colour from the bottom half, the daytime half if you will. And that reflective bezel effect is even more pronounced outside in natural light. Again, the black is the most conservative of the 3 colours, but the way they've worked the bicolour bezel on this particular model really gives the whole thing a lift. I will probably end up picking up an orange one at some stage. I'm not sure if the others have quite the same reflective effect, but I really do like it on this black colour variant. What I also like, but was also a little unexpected, is the Jubilee. It's actually pretty decent quality with solid end links, who knew? Now, these are not 5 links. It's not a 5-link Jubilee. They're actually only single links, but that means there isn't quite as much flex, but there also isn't nearly as much rattle as you get with the SKX. As you can see, not nearly as much flex, but not nearly as much of that. The clasp is pretty standard, just what you'd expect. Seiko stamped in the fold over, double pushers, pressed upper, pressed lower, 4 holes of micro adjustment. I should probably point this out, but it's no great surprise given the cost of these things. It's a collar GMT, meaning you pull the crown out, you roll the crown backwards, and it adjusts the date. You roll the crown forwards, and it adjusts the GMT hand 1 hour at a time. And if you pull the crown out to the second position, you hack the movement. Popping a link to show you those solid end links once more, and the star of the show today, the Seiko 4R34 movement, visually identical to the 4R35 and the 4R36. 24 jewel hacking and hand winding, bidirectional winding auto. You've seen a million of this one's close cousins before. It's not the most gorgeous movement to look at, but the Seiko 5 range is their entry-level range, so they do try and show off the automatic movements where possible with display casebacks. Roughly a 40-hour power reserve and stated tolerances of -20 to +40 seconds per day with these. Yes, perhaps not the best set of numbers I've seen from a 4R/NH movement over the years. That's why they give themselves such a broad 60-second range of tolerances from the factory. I can tweak this one if I can be bothered because I've got a time grapher, but if you don't have a time grapher, then you're at the mercy of the Seiko factory, I guess. It's a budget movement. You don't necessarily expect super accuracy from it. But let's not concern ourselves with such trivialities as accuracy here. Let's look at the reason why people are going to buy this one. That glorious GMT hand in a really nice shade of red. I have to say, it is one of the best GMT complications I've seen on any watch. The hand looks good. It's really noticeable without being overbearing on the dial as a whole. And you can also see from this shot the applied Seiko logo. Zooming back out, it does have a rather familiar feel to it, doesn't it? The dial, the hands pretty much carried over from the 5KX. So we have those embossed style indices with high polished silver surrounds, loom filled. The loom is good, by the way, I'll show you that in just a second. Big triangle at 12. With a syringe tip oblongs at the 6 and the 9, and circular indexes everywhere else. Date complication at the 3 with Cyclops. Now, people are 50-50 on Cyclops. I'm pro Cyclops, but I understand if you're anti-Cyclops. I reckon a fair number of people will be upgrading the Hardlex to Sapphire on these anyway. The Cyclops then becomes rather a moot point. We've had a look at the applied Seiko logo already. Beneath it sits the Superman S stylized Seiko 5. And beneath the pinion, automatic in italicized white font and GMT in block capital red to match the glorious fire engine red of the GMT hand. Now the angled chapter ring has printed minute markers. It also has printed Arabics for the GMT hand. On the evens, 2 all the way around to 24. Now those markings are replicated by the ones on the bezel insert, meaning in theory you can track 3 time zones here if you really want to. One using the hour minute hand, the second using the GMT hand and the chapter ring, the third by moving the bezel and tracking a 3rd time zone that way. That's the theory. I think in practice most people will just choose to track 2 and rely on the larger Arabics on the bezel insert rather than these slightly undersized ones on the chapter ring. Overall, it looks good in this black colour variant. It's clean, it's uncluttered, it's instantly recognisable as a Seiko diver, and it's really legible, including the GMT complication. And the legibility continues after dark as well. Seiko's Lumi Bright is well known. I rate it as a kind of solid 7 out of 10 in the wonderful world of looms, consistently 7 out of 10 as well. You may not be able to see the red colour of the GMT hand after dark, but they have used plenty of loom, so it's still very visible. At the end of the 20 minutes, everything's still glowing well. Good job on the loom, Seiko. And good job on the way this one wears as well. Strapcode used to do a rare trade with people buying Seikos, dumping the bracelets for aftermarket items. I don't think nearly as many people are going to be dumping this one as before. Perhaps they'll sell a few clasps. A thicker clasp would actually help balance it out a bit better as well. But overall, very nice indeed. It's as comfortable as the SKX was, but feels more sturdy on wrist. Short lug to lug. It's thick, it's chunky, but yeah, no problem at all on smaller wrists. Overhead legibility is also excellent, including the 4th hand, because they chose to use that lovely red colour. And the usual outside shots to finish then. I think it is a good looking watch. There's enough going on visually to keep you interested with the red hand and with that Hardlex bezel insert, but it does have a nice, comforting, familiar feel to it with that case shape, the crown down there at the 4 o'clock and that Jubilee bracelet. You know, I mentioned in the intro that I suspect this movement will end up in hundreds, if not thousands, of micro-brand watches. I'm sure it will end up in other watches from the Seiko range as well. Turtle GMT, anyone? How's about a Samurai GMT? Now those would be very, very interesting prospects, would they not? But that's all future fantasy. How's about present day reality? The moans and niggles section. Well, $475 US for a watch with an unsigned push-pull crown, mineral crystal and a rather cheap pressed clasp. If I got offered a micro with those specifications for that price, I would politely decline and tell them that my schedule was full. But with a Seiko, we smile, we nod, and we queue up anyway, don't we? And a bidirectional friction bezel, again, that feels like a cost-cutting exercise because it probably was a cost-cutting exercise. But as discussed, I think this is going to be a really important release for Seiko. I think perhaps it will draw back in people like me who weren't all that enamored by the 5KX a couple of years ago to the Seiko 5 range in general. We will fall for the seductive charms of that red GMT hand and that nice Jubilee bracelet, enabling us to forget that it isn't a proper dive watch and still has a number of inherent shortcomings. But then again, that's why the mod scene exists. I see no reason why 5KX parts won't go straight on this, meaning everything you need to turn this watch into the watch that it should have been in the first place already exists on the aftermarket. It's just going to cost you $100 more and a little bit of time and effort to get there. So there you have it. No great surprises from this one. We have indeed seen much of it before, but a rock solid choice for a budget GMT or a rock solid platform for the modders. Talking of which, should I go for double domed or flat sapphire crystal? If you're in the mood for more Seiko, why not check out my review of the last Seiko that really impressed me, the SRPE, or the great value offered by the King Samurai. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in a future video.